My name is Bonnie Ramsey. I'm a professor of pediatrics at the University of Washington School of Medicine, and I'm talking today about therapeutics development using the cystic fibrosis community as a model of success. So I'm delighted to be here, and as Fiona said, I am a pulmonologist, a pediatric pulmonologist, and for the last over 30 years I have been taking care of patients and families with cystic fibrosis. And I've had the honor of being not only part of their lives, but also part of two major drug development processes. Now, I never intended to be an entrepreneur, and actually when Fiona asked me, I said, but I'm not an entrepreneur. I was interested and passionate about trying to change the lives of the patients by getting new drugs. And so I think what I'd like to have you take away from this is, even though it's a huge process, you can be a key part of it, and you can enjoy every minute of it along the developmental pipeline, which I'll show you. I have to disclose any grants and contracts that I have. I am the director of the Therapeutics Development Network, which designs studies for cystic fibrosis around the world. And as such, we help a lot of companies, and all the contracts are through Seattle Children's Research Institute. I don't take any of the funds. Personally, the two that are highlighted, Novartis makes Toby and Vertex makes Kalydeco. I will be discussing them. Just to make it clear to you, I was one of the co-inventors on the patent of Toby, which is tobramycin for inhalation. I initially received $10,000 because they had to give me something, and in 1997, but had no stock. And for Kalydeco, I received no stock or reimbursement. So what does it take to develop an FDA-approved drug? I will come back to this, but if you start at the level of high throughput screening, which you see here, where you have many different chemical entities, and you're trying to look for what they call a hit, which means you have some laboratory assay. In this situation, it happens to be chloride movement, so an ion channel. And if you have movement, then you get a fluorescence, and that's a hit. So to move from that to actually having a drug, what is going to have to happen? Well, there's a lot of things to consider. Number one, not every chemical hit that you're going to get in a lab tray is going to be a drug. So can it be modified so that it's druggable? And that's what medicinal chemists do, working with a big team. So that's the number one question. Number two, can it even be manufactured? I mean, many people have wonderful ideas, but there's no way you're ever going to be able to make it at mass production at a price that anyone could pay. Now, many of you are thinking, do you know the price of Kalydeco? Yes, I do know the price of Kalydeco. Is there a market for the drug? It doesn't do you any good if you can't define who your market is and they can't sell it to someone. And how are you going to give it? I'm going to show you one drug that is inhaled, and the other drug is a pill. But you have to decide which way is going to be best for your target. Does it have an acceptable profile? And by a PK profile, we mean, can it be absorbed? Where does it go? How is it metabolized? And how do you get rid of it? So the FDA wants to know everything that ever happens to that drug once you give it. What's your target organ? Do you want it to just go to the brain? Do you want it just to go to the lung? Or is it systemic? Is it safe and tolerated? Is it benefiting the patient? Now, this is an important concept. I'll come back to it. There's a difference between a biologic effect and a clinical effect. You can have a biologic effect, but if it doesn't help the patient, it's not meaningful to the FDA. And is there an appropriate patient population? I think I mentioned that. So you can find lots of variations on this if you go on Bing or Google. And this one, I thought it was a nice one. I actually got this off of University of Wisconsin's website. But it shows you the phases of drug development. So at the far left, in the discovery phase, you'll often have thousands. For Kalydeco, I think they screen something like 100,000 compounds. And then you have to go through many iterations till you find something that's druggable. By that time, you're down to 100 to 200. And then you have to go through testing in animals and in different in vitro cell models to show whether you can get it to a dose that's reasonable and it's safe, it doesn't kill animals or whatever. And so that's the preclinical phase. And at that point, you start thinking about human trials. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see the hatched area. So it starts with phase 1, which are tiny trials, usually maybe 10 to 20 patients, to just see whether you can get the drug absorbed and is it safe. And then you go to the second phase, which is really, to me, the most exciting studies you do, because this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where you show whether you get a biologic effect and whether you have a potential candidate. At the end of phase 2 is what we usually say is the moment of proof of concept, and I'll come back to that. And then you go to phase 3, where you get the huge trials, which could be 1,000, maybe 10,000 patients. Depends on the patient population, and those are very expensive. This whole process is, if you're lucky, 10 to 15 years. And if you're lucky, it's only $500 million. Sometimes it's going to be up to $750 to $800 million. It's a very expensive proposition. But most of the money is going into the later phases. Proof of concept, it occurs, as I said, between phase 1 to 2 and phase 3. It's a very strong signal that you've got a winner. And why is this important? Because this is when a company decides whether they are going to invest in the large-scale manufacturing and the large-scale clinical trials. They've got to put at least $100 million on the line, and so that's a big decision. And what they go by is it safe and tolerable? Does it have good pharmacokinetics? Did it get into the body at levels that you could actually manufacture? And was it excreted and so forth? You have to show a biologic effect, at least, and I'll come back to this. Ideally, you want to show how it's helping the patient. You don't have to have that, but it sure helps if you've got something along those lines. I can see when you see that initial map going from 10,000 chemicals down to one product, $500 million later, it's like, well, how could I possibly do that? I think that, when I started out, I had no idea that I would be in drug development. I think I got into it, as I said, because of my passion for trying to do something for the patients. And just the process itself was enjoyable. I will tell you, I've worked with many, many companies, and I've been involved in many, many failures. So you're seeing the two, there's like 80 on the other side. So you have to understand there's a balance here. But nobody can do it alone. Part of the fun is you work in these huge teams. Again, when I was able to be part of the Aurora team, working with people I would never have met in my life and getting their input was just so rewarding. But you need to ask for help early. You could see with Toby, when we got started, we went down the wrong road. We happened to come out okay in the end, but there was a lot of wasted effort there. But back then, they didn't have what we have now. So now there really are people to reach out for. Obviously, the Center for Commercialization, if you have an idea, they will get you plugged in to people that can help you. The Institute for Translational Health Sciences has what's called its Drug Discovery Advisory Committee, which will take your idea and connect you. Often, for example, they may connect you with a fellow in the School of Business who will put together a business plan for you. We've had fellows from the law school to help with contractual issues. School of Pharmacy, one of the people we often work with is Rodney Ho, who will be very helpful in formulation. So you just need to step out and ask for help, and it's there for you. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for your attention.